Again, I want to say thank you all for being here, taking the time out of your morning, afternoon, or evening to be here and hang out with me and listen to me give some insight on kind of my journey and what I've learned along the way. I would like to start with a story because I think they're fun. There was this guy, Keith, decided to do a cross country trip. He wanted to go from East Coast America to West Coast. And he loaded up his car with all of his stuff to explore the U.S. And as he's making his way across the country, he needed to fill up for gas and he needed some snacks and stuff. And he stopped at this little mom and pop's gas station somewhere in Kansas. And he pulls up next to the gas station or the gas pump and he starts filling up his car. And he tops it off and then he decides to go in to get like Snickers bar and Coca-Cola and stuff like that. And as he's walking in, it's again like a little mom and pop station. And he notices on the front porch of this little mom and pop station, there's this dog that's just laying on the porch and it's just whimpering, uh, as if it's like something's not right with it. And he kind of gave it a side eye and he went inside, grabbed his lickies and chewies, went up to the counter and paid for the gas and the snacks and start up a conversation with the individual behind the cash or the counter. He's like, "Hey, what's going on with the dog out on the front porch?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's Buford. He's laying on a nail." Well,
Mm.
why doesn't he just move? Well, I guess it just doesn't hurt bad enough yet. And I want you to keep that story in mind as I tell you a little bit of my journey. So I enlisted in the Army when I was 28. It was 2012, but the few years leading up to that, I was working at this really fancy hotel in Virginia. It's like five-star resort. A bunch of famous people come there all the time. And my job consisted of helping them with their dinner reservations and teaching little kids how to play frisbee golf. We roasted marshmallows every evening, and I was in charge of that as well. So, I mean, looking back, it was kind of like a really good job because it was tons of fun, and I got to hang out with a lot of really cool people. Um, as as I was working that job, they happened to be like short staffed in the dining room, and they needed to pull from other departments to help out taking food out to the patrons. And so they asked me to come out, and I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And again, the job itself was not bad. I It paid my bills. Things were going well. They were starting to groom me towards like more of a managerial position. They were going to move me up the ranks within the hotel. But I remember I was in the dining room. I had this tray of food that I was taking out to the patrons, and this overwhelming sense of anger just filled me up. And I gave them their food, and I had to like take a break and ask myself, why am I so angry right now? And over the next couple days or even weeks, I realized I was so angry because I was so unfulfilled. I was so unsatisfied with what was going on in my life. And it's like I said, it's not because things were necessarily bad. My bills were paid. I worked with like my best friend, and that was great, going to work every day. But I just wanted to do something more. And as a result, I got really angry because I wasn't living for something bigger than myself. Um, and so, to the dismay of my supervisors, I was like, "Hey, I stop grooming me to be a supervisor and a manager down the road. I'm joining the army." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And all right, so why pick the army? Why pursue something like that in such stark contrast to the job I just held, right? And and as I reflected on it over the years, I think the bottom line came down to I wanted to one pursue something where success was not guaranteed, where the path wasn't just laid out for me and I could just check off the boxes and move my way up. Rather, I wanted to pursue something where I could legitimately give it all of my effort and all of my energy and still come up short. That was one part of it. And two, I wanted to involve myself and be part of a story that was much bigger than myself. And at the time I didn't really know how to articulate that, but looking back, that's kind of what I wanted to pursue. Um, the path that I was currently on was, yes, I was helping the hotel at large and helping people have a great vacation when they came to visit, but I wanted to be part of something bigger. And so that's why I pursued the military. And for me, my military career, I spent 10 years in. Most of you know I was in special forces, and it was a blast most of the time. It was still part of the Army, so I had to do Army things like, cyber awareness and all that stuff, online training. Uh, but I want to talk a little bit about my journey through special forces and now what do I do now? Um, for me, the Q course or the Special Forces qualification course was 3 years. I was voluntold to be a medic, and so that tacked on like another 9 to 12 months of the Q course. And throughout that time, again, my path wasn't guaranteed. I could at any moment fail out of a particular phase and come up short, and then I'd be needs of the Army. I could be sent to Alaska or the 82nd Airborne or whatever, and my journey that I wanted to chase down would be done. And so for 3 years, I had to wake up every day and say, yes, this is what I want. This is what I want to continue to pursue. And I have to give my best effort on a daily basis to ensure the the most likelihood of success or achieving that desired end state. Uh, as things progressed, I eventually graduated the Q course and I donned my Green Beret. And that was a big moment for me, for sure. And I want to touch on something I realized after I got to the teams and got into group, and that being sometimes people take a big achievement like that, and that's where they stop. They allow themselves to say, "Yes, I have arrived. I don't need to try anymore." And I myself and a couple of my friends were not like that. We were constantly chasing, like, all right, how do we improve? How do we continue to push ourselves, and not just professionally as Green Berets, but on a personal, individual basis as well. Um, we would often sit next to each other and say, all right, what books are you reading? How are you challenging your mind? What workouts are you engaging in? Are you staying in shape, or are you allowing those love handles to blossom? Um, what I realized at the end of my Army career, when I decided to get out, is that having traveled that journey and reached that particular mountaintop, it gave me a better view of what else is out there and what other opportunities I could begin to pursue, which is eventually what led me to doing what I do now, which is high performance coaching for individuals. Um, before I move on, I want to do a quick exercise with you all. If you're driving, please don't shut your eyes. But anybody else that happens to be sitting at a desk, I want to give you 2 minutes, and I want you to conduct the rocking chair test. And the rocking chair test is this: imagine yourself at 90 years old, and you're sitting on your rocking chair on your front porch. How do you want your life to look? Um, I want you, if you have the opportunity, close your eyes, really envision this. Think about the stories you want to be able to tell your friends and family. Uh, I want you to ask yourself, what kind of people are surrounding you on your front porch? Are you alone? Are you surrounded by close friends? Are you surrounded by, children and grandchildren, maybe great grandchildren? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Think through that and think on how you want your life to have unrolled. That's 2 minutes. Now, the reason I wanted you to do that exercise is back when I was working at that hotel, and particularly in that dining room setting, I I knew a couple of things without actually having known it. First, I knew that if I stayed on that path, that rocking chair test would look very different than what it does right now. Um, I could see the path kind of laid out for me. And what I'm going to tell you next may sound a little counterintuitive based on the path being laid out. But to be honest, while I was working at that hotel, I felt incredibly like stuck and lost, almost as though I was walking around in the woods and not knowing where to actually go. I was checking all the boxes, and I was doing all the right things, but I still felt like overwhelmingly like there has to be more. I want there to be more. And where I am right now is keeping me locked down to this path. And I didn't like it. Now the everybody's rocking chair test is going to look a little bit different. Um, but what that really talks about is like legacy. What do you want to be remembered for at the end of your life and even after you're gone? I think a big part of that for sure is relationship. But how does one figure out what their legacy is going to be? And I think a big part of that is establishing what kind of purpose do you want to live for? And and to be honest, it's sometimes very difficult to nail down, okay, well, what's my purpose? I mean, even today, I have trouble like articulating it. I think the best I've been able to come up with is I want to be the epitome of human excellence, and I want to help others achieve that too. Now, if you can't articulate your purpose, if you can't figure out what your legacy is going to be, um, I have another trick you can use to start to narrow that down, and that is figuring out exactly what you don't want your purpose, your legacy to be. For example, I don't want to be remembered as a fat slob that only watches TV all day. And so that is going to change my behavior a little bit because I don't want that, right? I also don't want to be remembered as somebody who is unreliable and who treats people poorly. Because I don't want that, that's going to adjust my behavior on a daily basis on how I interact with folks. And so if you don't know what your life purpose is, or you don't know exactly what you want your legacy to be, you have the means by which to start filtering out the things you don't want, and that will begin to narrow the field so you can start aiming in the right direction. I start off this whole talk with that parable of the dog that's laying on the nail. And for me, that's exactly how I felt when I was working at the hotel. And I was fortunate enough to actually recognize it. The nail analogy, I think, is applicable to a lot of people, um, but they often don't realize how uncomfortable they may be. Like it just doesn't hurt bad enough yet. Uh, a lot of you may be familiar with David Goggins' story. I would argue he skipped the whole nail part and was just straight rock bottom. The beginning of his story, like his upbringing, was incredibly rough, and the breaking point for him was he was quite obese, working at a dead end job exterminating cockroaches, and that was the moment where he hit rock bottom hard enough where he's like, nope, things are changing right now. And now, I mean, again, you probably are all familiar with him. He was a Navy SEAL, motivational speaker now, and like the toughest man on the planet. Rock bottom can be a great catalyst to propel you forward and move you in the direction that requires change of you. Most people don't hit rock bottom. Most people are just laying on the nail and are just uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt bad enough yet to make the change. Um, I consider myself incredibly fortunate and lucky that I recognized that I was laying on the nail, that I was so uncomfortable and not satisfied that I needed to make a change. And so I was again fortunate I didn't have to hit rock bottom to have that catalyst. So so what is your nail? what is the thing that is uncomfortable right now in your life? What is the thing that is causing you pain, but it hasn't quite hit that point where it's like I have to move. And if you can recognize it, you can move right now. Um, I hope that you all haven't hit rock bottom yet. Again, it can be a great catalyst, but I want you to skip that whole part and recognize the nail that you happen to be sitting on. Once you recognize that, now we can start talking about, okay, yeah, what is my legacy? What is my purpose? Um, and so I'm going to open it up. If anybody's brave enough to share, do you have a purpose? And if so, are you willing to say it in front of other people? And if you don't have a purpose, are you willing to work with me a little bit right now to see if we can dial it in a little bit? Ready, go.
Who's going to jump on the grenade? Um, I think I know what I'm good at. I think I know what my purpose could be. It's just finding a way to do that. It's like you, I was in the army. I wasn't special forces, but I was training dummy for Robin Sage. I was stationed at Bragg at the time,
Nice.
and um, to some extent, I found, and not this gets us to the point, I guess. Um, you mentioned the open-endedness of the army was what led you to it, the ability to kind of like for lack of a term, jump out of a plane and figure out if the chute's going to open or not.
Right, right.
I thought I was the opposite. From my upbringing, I needed structure, and the army provided structure, and almost that checked the box. Nature was helpful to me, but because of that, and because of having gotten to the point where I was an NCO teaching and training others, I'm good at that. And in my most recent roles, I find the most fulfillment when I'm able to teach and train others how to do what it is that we do.
Awesome.
Um, the unfortunate thing is trying to find those opportunities in a way that's realistic.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, if you want to ask what a purpose is, I think my purpose is to help others, to train others in whatever the topic it happens to be.
Yeah. That's great. And what I see, like if you were to boil that down into its most basic component, what I interpret that as, you want to be able to serve others in some capacity, and if that's through teaching, that's awesome. Um, does anybody else want to go?
I can go.
Send it.
Um, I mean, for so long I've viewed my purpose as, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I
Mhm.
think I'm damn good at it. I teach at the law school. Uh, I know all my colleagues come to me when they have trial, for my advice. I love the work. But as we were doing your test just a moment ago about your front porch, all I could think about was my kids. All I
Yeah.
could think about was, I hope they have their heads screwed on straight, uh, and they can get through without getting into trouble and, have a good life. So, when we think about our purpose, I think there's many dimensions to that, and I think about like, what's my purpose with my wife? What's my purpose with my kids? What's my purpose with my career? So you give that little exercise gave me a little more to think about than the framework that I have been thinking about
Sure.
throughout my life. So that's all I have.
I appreciate you sharing that, and that brings up something that I do want to showcase is that career doesn't have to be purpose. Career could be the means by which you fund your purpose. And so, uh, Vinny, like in your case, it sounds like subconsciously your purpose is really with your family, and the legacy you want to leave behind is with your children specifically, and that's awesome. And the career that you chose happens to be funding that. You know what I mean? Um, something I say often mostly to myself, but I have shared it with others, is like I I am the standard by which my daughters measure all men. And that's part of my legacy I want to leave behind as well. My oldest daughter is at a point where like kind of everything I say is dumb because I said it. And and so uh and so my goal really, instead of just trying to teach her every time I'm with her, is to just live the way that a man should, to be the example for her. So when she's hopefully in not anywhere near to right now, but like when she's starting to seek out a partner, she has a decent standard to measure that by. So want to be valued. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned with regards to daughters because one of the sort of to Vincent's point is understanding that purpose can be multifaceted and is not tied to one specific aspect of your life.
Right.
But something that's been sort of a profound driver for me recently is early in the parenthood side of things. I got a daughter that's a year and a half. I got another daughter on the way. I've seen a lot of examples of. I grew up with 4 older sisters, and their relationship with my dad was not always great. I think he did his best in the ways that he knew how, but it's the pitfalls and the downfalls of their relationships have led to mixed results for them as adults in their selections of partners and how they've gone about life.
Right.
That has been a bit of a driving factor for me now, being responsible for 2 little girls, to not only to drive myself in such a way to, establish a purpose, independent career side, which obviously I have plenty of drives there and pursuits there, but
sure.
Specifically, I want to be in a position to model both the performance side of what people can do as a benchmark for when they're pursuing potential partners, but also on the relational side.
Yeah.
And so developing the aspects of myself that allow me to have close, intimate, strong relationships with my children so that they know what that looks like, and then also to model it in the relationship with my wife.
Yeah.
Because that the model by which I treat their mother becomes the model by which they expect to be treated. And 100%. So those are a couple of driving factors in sort of, and I understand that that's going to morph and change and shift over time, but for now, that is a pretty significant portion of my selected purpose.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. So I mentioned not only rock bottom, but also the nail that could be a driving factor. The commonality between both of those is it does require a bit of an identity shift. My identity was hotel employee. The general manager of the hotel used to refer to my department as, concierge on steroids. And I didn't want to be that anymore. So it required an identity shift on my part to begin chasing down another path. And in each of your own paths, you should be starting to ask, like, all right, so what is the identity shift that I need to take in order to pursue the appropriate path to achieve the legacy I want to achieve? When I was still working at the hotel and I was already talking to recruiters and stuff like that, I was starting to work out a lot too. And because the identity shift that I started to adopt is, if I want to be a Green Beret, I need to start acting like a Green Beret, which is like, okay, I guess I need to be strong. So I started hitting the gym. And at first I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like throwing weight around. And then I started to dial it in and do a lot of research and figure out what that actually looks like in the gym. But then I started to also fill my mind with things that will, I think, best set me up for that path, which would really just translate to a bunch of military books. I read pretty much everything I get my hands on in regards to, Navy SEALs and Delta Force and Green Berets, because I wanted to get my mindset in the right place to start pursuing that path. I needed to actually change my identity from the guy that would just like scroll on YouTube while at work, to the guy that was filling his mind with the right things to set me up for success. Um, and so as each of you are reflecting on your rocking chair test and the kind of legacy that you want to leave behind, the question that is then tied to that is, all right, what kind of identity shift do I need to make in order to be on that right path? And with my coaching, like after I got out of the Army, I started my one-on-one coaching business, and that's like the first step that I take with all of my clients is, all right, tell me, who do you want to be before you tell me what you want to achieve. Um, a lot of you here have heard this story, but for those that haven't heard it, I'll tell a quick story about a parachute malfunction. So I had just come back from Germany. I spent 3 years over there, and I come to Fort Carson, Colorado, and I land on a free fall team. And all that means is like every special forces team has their own specialty. There's like dive teams and ruck teams and mountain teams. I was on a free fall team, so we specialize in exiting aircraft at altitude, and then flying through the sky under canopy and landing on a DZ together, drop zone together. Well, I won't lie. I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to jump free fall in Germany, and so when I got to Fort Carson, I was a little rusty for sure. And being the new guy on the team, the fear is you don't want to look dumb. So so always perform. But our first trip together as a team was to go down to Arizona and do a requalification for free fall skills. And that's really just to make sure everybody's on the same page and our skills are up to par. And again, I was a little nervous. It had been a while. Monday morning, we're doing a Hollywood jump, which is just your parachute, your altimeter, and your radio. We get up to altitude, so it's like 12 to 14,000 feet. We do our safety checks. That ramp drops open. We get the green light. First couple guys exit. I get to the edge of the ramp. I dive out, I get on heading, check my altimeter, pull my ripcord. Everything went perfect. I was like, oh, thank God. Because the first rule of special operations is always look cool. And so I didn't want to look dumb throughout that whole process. But I was relieved that like some of those skills were starting to come back and I was shaking the dust off. As the week progresses, we just started adding more and more equipment to ourselves until Friday we're doing a wall locker jump, which is everything in our wall locker is now attached to us. I had a rucksack between my legs, my rifles across my waist. I got my oxygen tank on my back and an oxygen mask. I had a chest rig that had like GPS and boat compass on it and stuff like that. So we waddle out to the aircraft, and again, I'm feeling pretty good. Like all my jumps so far have been pretty solid. We get up to altitude, ramp drops open, green light. First couple guys dive out. I get to the edge ramp, had a great exit, get on heading, check altimeter, pull ripcord, and I look up and I've got line twists. And if you're going to have a malfunction with your parachute, that's the one you want because it's super easy to fix. All it means is like the lines from your harness to the canopy have twisted, and you just grab them, pull them apart, and you eventually unwind. Well, free fall chutes are designed a little bit differently than your standard airborne. They're designed more like a wing, and so they're super maneuverable, but they also have like drive to them. So for every vertical foot you drop, it drives you forward 3 feet. So as I'm unwinding myself, my chute actually kicks me out sideways. So I'm almost parallel to the ground. And then it begins to drive me towards the earth due to the shape of the canopy. And then I begin to spiral. And I'm starting to whip through the sky. And admittedly, somebody less stubborn than I would have just cut that parachute away and pulled their ripcord, and they would have been totally fine. And their reserve would have deployed and they would have been landing just fine. But again, little stubborn, maybe a little nervous because I'm still kind of the new guy on the team. I was riding that wave. And so I'm whipping through the sky, and like imagine tying a rock to a string and then swinging it over your head. I am the rock in this particular analogy, and all the blood happens to be now pushed to my feet. So my vision starts to close in a little bit like this. And I'm like, I better fix this really quick or or it's the last thing I'll do. And finally, kind of at the last second before I black out, my lines untwist and I grab my brakes and I yank them, and that levels me out. So I'm under good canopy. But now I'm incredibly dizzy. I later found out that I spiraled for about 7,000 feet before I fixed myself. Uh, and so like I'm like looking all over the sky. I'm super disoriented. I can't find any of my friends. And that's when they all start yelling over the radio. Chris, turn around. Chris, you're going the wrong way. Chris, go left. No, your other left. Chris, check your GPS. So I check my chest rig, and the GPS is just spinning in circles because I'm still so dizzy. And and finally there's like a break in radio chatter. And Matt, super senior guy on the team. Side note on Matt, he's the grumpiest man I've ever met. He is only happy when he's falling out of an airplane. But anyway, he comes over the radio, super calm. He's like, "Hey, Chris, turn towards the sun." We were dropping in the morning, and our drop zone was generally east of us. And so I look around, and the sun's right behind me. So I hit a hard left turn. And about that time, my buddy Andy swoops in front of me and guides me to the drop zone. And we all land on the DZ together. I pull my oxygen mask off, and I'm just like dry heaving because I'm so still quite dizzy. And I later take Matt out for beers because I definitely owed him one. And he says, Chris, what you experience is what I refer to as the Phoenix phenomenon. And I said, tell me more. Well, each of our parachutes has a device called a Cypress, which is designed that if I were to exit the aircraft and it like hit my head and became unconscious as I'm falling at terminal velocity, that Cypress would recognize that I'm falling too fast. And once I hit a certain altitude, it would fire and deploy my reserve chute for me. Matt was telling me that because I was spiraling, I wasn't falling fast enough for that to have engaged, and I would have burned in like a phoenix. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. All right, so what's the point of the story? The point of the story is the sun and the sky in that particular analogy is as we're navigating life, it has to be that identity shift that I mentioned just a little bit ago. Um, the thing that I'm striving for, the legacy and purpose that I want to leave behind, has to be off in the distance that I can orient my life to. As I'm navigating the chaos and the disorientation of day-to-day life, I have to be able to fix my direction on something that's solid and stable in order to better move towards success, and in that case, the appropriate drop zone, right? So as you're thinking about your legacy and you're thinking about your purpose, figure out what that sun in the sky is, because that will be the identity shift that you need to get on the right path moving forward. Does that make sense? I hope so. um, at this point, I want to open it up to Q&A. Q&A is always my favorite part because I get to actually like talk with you one-on-one and work through things kind of in real time. So at this point, anybody has a question, feel free to shout it out, or if you want to just type it in the chat, that's totally fine too.
What was your MOS before SFAS? I realize that's a little bit separate from what we got going on here, but I'm just curious.
No problem. So I enlisted as 11 Bravo, which is infantryman, but I picked up my 18 X-ray contract at basic, and so I went straight into the pipeline after AIT.
Wow.
Yeah. Anybody else?
What language did you learn?
Russian. Admittedly, I don't remember most of it.
How about German? You've been in Germany for 3 years.
I was in Germany for 3 years, and I tried to learn a little bit. It just never stuck.
Ein Bier bitte.
I totally understand.
Chris, what is you've been doing this for a while. I saw, like, obviously I see behind you, your book is behind you.
Yeah.
I kind of checked that out a little bit on Amazon. What would you say your greatest success has been so far since you've made this transition from being an operator to being a different kind of operator?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm actually kind of glad you brought that up. So I mentioned before that I joined the Army because I wanted to pursue something where success was not guaranteed, right? That's actually why I got out too. Um, when I hit my like about 10-year mark, I realized that like the path was starting to get kind of carved out for me. And I I began to get the job was difficult, but I began to get kind of comfortable with the job. And um, I could see the path like clearly paved for me in regards to like, all right, promotion around this time, schools I need to go to achieve promotion, etc. And I got to the point where I was like, I I need to pursue something where success is not guaranteed. And that's kind of why I got out and started my own business, which is like a whole new different skill set. It sitting at my desk, like doing emails or doing like Zoom coaching calls with my clients is way different than jumping out of an airplane. Um, but back to your question, I think my greatest success has been working with individuals like one on one and actually seeing that light bulb go off in their head and watch them change their identity to pursue the life that they actually want. One of my best clients, she's in South Africa. She showed up to me, and the identity that she was striving for at that point was, and forgive my language, but she was like, I don't want to be a fuck up. That's the best she could come up with. It took us a while to get through that, because if that's the highest standard you are aiming for, um, life isn't going to go as well as you want. And through some back and forth, I finally got her to bust through that limiting mindset and say, no, this is my identity. She wants to be healthy, and she wants to serve others, and she wants to live a life of adventure and excitement. Um, once she made that shift, everything changed in her life. She went from like a 2XL blouse down to a small within a matter of months. And I didn't give her a single workout plan or diet plan. Her identity shifted so thoroughly that she made the change. She was no longer on a diet or working out. She was like, no, my identity is I'm a healthy person. I'm going to live that way. And it changed everything for her. And that's just one facet of her life. Another guy, Nick, he came to me kind of the same way. He's like, I just want to lose weight. All right, right on. Tell me who you want to be first. And as he and I work together, um, he lost a ton of weight as well, and now he's starting to pursue things that uh, stretch him. Like he just completed a Spartan race. It's like his first adventure race ever, and now he's totally hooked. He just signed up for a 10K that's this weekend or next weekend, excuse me. And these are things that a year ago he would be like, I'd never be able to do that. That's just not in the cards for me. Um, and then very recently he told me, I've been scared of heights my entire life. And so I signed up for a tandem skydive jump. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. Like when, because he's traveled this path where he's achieved a great deal of, particularly in like the physical area of life, like he got in really good shape. He's reached this kind of like mountaintop, and now that he's here, he has a better view of what else is possible. It like really just opened up his horizon and the opportunities that he has. And so I know this was a long-winded way to answer your question, but my greatest successes have been working with people who didn't think they could, and now they know they can, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Not necessarily a question, but sort of a live example of what you're talking about. This shirt I got for completing a 5K in 2021. And that was 4 years after I'd gotten out of the Army. Hadn't really run at all since. And I ran that and it sucked. It really, really sucked. But I did it because my wife wanted to. And at that point, I wouldn't say I was like grossly obese, but I was definitely carrying around way more than I should have.
Right.
After that race, I didn't really run much until much at all for quite a while. And then started working with Chris a while back.
Yeah.
I don't remember how
year and a half.
Yeah. And around that time, I was also just seeking out better relationships with more impactful people like immediately around me as well. And since then, I have since completed my first sprint triathlon, and I'm in the process of training to do a 50K in a few months. That is a far cry from this guy that got this shirt in 2021 and was dying by the end of a 5K.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, thanks for the help.
My pleasure. Anybody else?
You don't mind?
Yeah, please.
So my question has to do with time. I'm a terrible procrastinator. I've been all my life. So what are some of the tools that you could use to maybe use your time better, or just frankly, it's one thing to know what you want to do, but it's another thing to
do the thing.
Get yourself off the couch and get going.
Right. My experience with procrastination, and believe me, I'm not immune to it, is for me, part of it, at least a semblance of it, is because I still want to control something. And if I can put something off, that means I'm in charge of when it happens, right? And it is like a backwards way to think about it. But that is often my response. Like if I know I have to send out a couple of emails, and I just don't want to do it, yeah, I'll just do it later. That is me like trying to own control over this task that I need to be done. That is kind of being imposed on me by somebody else, right? And so for procrastination, some of the best tools that I have found is take whatever task it is and break it down into such ridiculously small, minute steps that it's almost embarrassing if you can't do it. So case in point, maybe you want to go work out in your gym or at the gym somewhere. The first step isn't going to the gym. The first step is putting your workout clothes in your gym bag and your shoes and leaving that next to the door. That's step one. And the little mental trick you can give yourself is, if I can do that, I give myself permission to go sit back down on the couch and be done for the day. What you'll often find is after you've done that task is like, well, I can probably do a little bit more. And so the next step in that phase is, all right, I'm going to grab my car keys and my wallet, and I'm going to pick up my bag and shoes. I'm going to walk out my front door. As soon as I break the threshold, I give myself permission to go sit back down. But once you're there, you're starting to build like a little bit of momentum as you're pursuing these tasks. And so the next step might be like, I'm just going to put my stuff in my car and sit in the front seat. I'm not even going to shut my driver door. But as soon as I sit down, I give myself permission to go back to the couch. But once you're there, you find that like, okay, I can go a little further. And so you can kind of see what I'm getting to is like, if you take whatever task it is and break it down so small, you do begin to build like some momentum psychologically that like gets you there. And even if you get all the way to the gym and say, all right, I give myself permission to just not even enter the gym. I'm going to sit in the parking lot. And once I do that, I can go back home. but like at that point, you've built so much momentum. You're like, well, I'm already here. I'll go stand on the treadmill. I won't even turn the thing on, you know. And I think you kind of see what I'm getting at. But that is the best way to tackle procrastination, is to break whatever task it is that you're trying to control and put off, and break it down so small that it's embarrassing not to do at least a couple of those steps. Somebody else wrote in the message, can you tell us more about your one-on-one programs and what you offer folks? So again, as you know, like I'm a coach now. I got out of the Army and wanted to pursue something where I still get to serve people, but on my own terms. And if one-on-one coaching is what you're asking about, my whole philosophy, and there's a couple of my clients in here right now, but my whole philosophy is, let's sit down and figure out very clearly and specifically who you want to be, and then we'll tack goals onto it. And so my process begins with identity, and I tell my parachute story to everybody. So a couple of them were smiling already because they'd heard it probably like 10 times by now. But I start with the parachute story to establish like the importance of the identity. And I break life down into 5 categories. So mental, physical, emotional, social, and financial. Each of those could have subcategories to it, but I think those are the heavy hitters. And if you can dial those in, then you're moving in a good direction. So tell me your identity in each of those areas. That's our first session together as coach and client. That usually takes about an hour at least, and often some fine tuning, particularly if one of us is being stubborn. Once that's established, once that identity is like set in stone, then we move on to actual goal setting. And I usually aim for about 5 years out, because I think it's far enough away that you can build some compound interest of effort, is what I call it. It's far enough out that you can like really build momentum, but it's not so far out that it feels ethereal and in the ether somewhere. There's a quote that I often paraphrase from Bill Gates, which is, we often overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and drastically underestimate what we can accomplish in 5. So once you have your identity set, we start building out your goals in each of those areas that I mentioned earlier. And then for those of us that have been in the military, we know backwards planning is just part of everyday life. We have a hit time, and then we just figure out all the steps leading up to that hit time, right? Well, I do the same process for these 5-year goals. If you want to have $20,000 in the bank at the end of 5 years, what has to happen in this first year? That becomes a milestone that we aim towards. And then based on that milestone, what has to happen in this first month? What has to happen in this first week? And then what do I have to do today? Which often, when you break it all the way down, is a super small step. What do I have to do today to be on track to hit that year milestone, and then ultimately my 5-year goal? I'll tell another quick story real quick. My very first client, he was kind of down on his luck and was struggling with all areas of life. But once we started working through the identity piece and then setting goals, we got to the financial area of life. And I was like, all right, tell me what you want to achieve in 5 years financially. And he's like, I don't know, man, maybe have $5,000 saved in the bank. I was like, dude, that's not big enough. Aim higher. How about $20,000 saved up in the bank? He's like, nope, there's no way I could ever do that. It's impossible. And I asked him why. And then I start hitting divide on the calculator. And when you break 20K down over the course of 5 years, it winds up being like $11 a day. And so I asked him, I was like, hey man, every day when you go to work, can you put $11 in your bank account? He's like, yeah, I can totally do that. And so throughout my coaching process with folks, I often have to like encourage people to aim higher for their 5-year goals, because when we do get to the backwards planning, the breakdown process, you'll see that those daily steps are so easy that it's very manageable, kind of regardless of how big your goal may be. So cool. All right. Any other questions?
I guess the only one I would have, and I realize I don't know if we were scheduled for an hour or not, so I don't want to take anyone else's time, but how do you deal with failure? You personally?
Yeah. I've trained myself not to be afraid of it, because failure means that I am pursuing something that I'm not very good at yet. Uh, another quick story. I'm full of them today. I started jujitsu a couple years ago, and I walked into the dojo, and I was admittedly pretty confident in my skill set. I just left the army as a Green Beret, and I walk in, I'm like, I think I can handle this. And it was like the first week, I'm still in like the trainer pajama loner geese that they give you, and we happen to have like some open mat time, and I was rolling with this kid. He was like 16 years old and maybe 110 pounds. And I was like, I got this. And 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 then he folded me up like a pretzel and choked me out. And that was like that moment. I was like, all right, there's a great deal that I still have to learn. And I had the opportunity. I could have just left and walked out and never come back. Um, but understanding that I needed to go through that failure in order to understand that my depth of knowledge in this skill set is precisely zero. And that's a good thing because that means I'm trying things that I'm not good at yet. And so again, kind of a long-winded way to answer your question, but my approach to failure is if I'm failing at something, that means I'm outside my comfort zone, and that is a really good thing because that's where all the growth happens, and a little bit of discomfort is very healthy.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Here's a variation on that. How do you handle when you fail at something that you're supposed to be good at already?
Yeah. Yeah. The best piece of advice I got was during selection, and it was one of the cadre sat us down after a team day or a team week event. And so we're all like exhausted and dirty and gross. And he's like, listen up, men. Every one of you is going to have a bad day. The trick is to have more good days than bad. And and when I take that philosophy, it's like, yeah, sometimes I'm going to mess up on something that I should be really good at. As long as I acknowledge it, not try to shove it under the or brush it under the rug, but acknowledge it, accept it, and then improve tomorrow. That is the goal. And some of my clients that are in here, they know that as we're tracking our daily tasks and our weekly tasks, I encourage them to strive for an 85% execution rate. And that allows for life to happen because, as we all know, life does happen and disrupts routine. And so it gets you out of the pass fail mindset, and you can still believe that you're progressing towards the life you want, even if your week was not perfect.
I had to use that yesterday. I was supposed to do a long run, and I was supposed to run for an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I ended up waking up later than I should have to take this little one to a certain location. And, I realized I was not going to be able to do the entire run. There's a huge portion of me that was just like, maybe just push it tomorrow. We'll figure out another way to do it, etc. And I was like, you know what? Now I'm just going to go out and I'm going to run as much as I have time for.
Right.
Out, and I ran the percentage by the time I got back ended up being 69% of that run. And now I did all of the other runs to standard throughout the week, so my overall hit rate is above 85%.
Right on.
But I leaned pretty hard on that. I was like, yeah, 69, 70% of it is better than none of it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, perfect.
Michael, just like you, I've got some experience with running. And one of the ones we used to always use was did not finish, or did not finish is always better than did not start.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a good one.
Yeah. Anyone else?
More of a comment than a question, but I just wanted to let you know, I appreciate your time here today. I'm going to use your suggestions, actually, just now for procrastination, because there's something I have to go and get done.
Gotcha.
Also, I just bought your book, so I'm looking forward to what you have to say in there. And
Awesome.
other than that, just good luck to you, and thanks for your time.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for the support. Cool. I do want to take an opportunity. I was asked, how do you schedule a session one-on-one with me? There's a couple options. One, you can check out my material on social media. It's probably where most of you found me. And there's ways to DM me there. Or I would like to introduce you to Eric, who's been a longtime client of mine, and he and I have begun to work side by side to help grow this thing, to reach out to more people, to ensure that more people have the opportunity to lay out the legacy that they want and achieve the life that they want. So if it's cool, I'm gonna let Eric introduce himself and say hi.
Thank you very much for that, Chris.
Yeah.
So, hey everyone, I'm Eric. I've been working with Chris for a bit over a year now, and I've gone into the coaching to really nail down that identity component as a 20-year-old to be set up for the long term here. And so I really found this community to be a good place to find mentors that I can model to then pull out the parts that I want to be like. Now, lately, I've been moving on to work with Chris side by side, as he said, to grow this platform, which also ties into a bit to my purpose, which is to give those that are very, very hardworking and want to spread a positive impact a chance to have a bigger voice to make that impact on the world. And I think that's about it for now. If you want to schedule a call, we just go about it as you direct message Chris or me on Zoom, and we move it from there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So today we talked about the nail that's poking you in the side, or potentially rock bottom, and what is required to develop the legacy and the purpose that you want in life, which bottom line is identity shift. Changing who you want to be to better align with that legacy you want to leave behind. I do want to thank you all for being here, and I've taken the time out. We've gone over an hour right now. Time always flies when we get to hang out and talk amongst each other.